Yeah, so I want to talk about two things here. The first is pulling from other people, other ideas, things in the world that are concrete, made by other people. And then we'll talk about that. And then I want to talk about pulling from your own experiences. So start off with other people. I think that this is something that we can encourage kids to do, which would be, it'd be really fun to basically have a weekend project and you go out and you write about something that you did, maybe a movie that you watched, a TV show that you saw. Hey, I really like this TV show. So I'm going to just make this up on the fly. There's this show that I really liked growing up called The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. It was on Disney Channel. Watched it 1,000 times. And there's a great episode that really stuck with me. And Zach and Cody are allowed to do whatever they want. And there's no homework. There's no school, nothing organized. They can do nothing but have fun. And the mom goes from being like the strict mom to being the cool mom. And she like starts being like a rock star and stuff like that. And it's an interesting episode because they start off and they're so happy. They're getting to do all these things, like rollerblading through the hotel lobby. And then at the end of the episode, they're totally miserable. They've had candy and mom's not there for them. And there's this line where Zach, who's normally like the crazy, mess around boy, he goes, it turns out that having nothing but fun isn't actually so much fun. I was like 12 years old and it really stuck with me. So now if I'm 12 years old, I'm in what? 6th grade, 7th grade. And I can come in on Monday and I can build on that quote, on that idea, and I can write about whatever I want. And I would love to just give kids an assignment where they can just pull these different things from their life, blend them together and say, okay, now that you have all these things, what is the synthesis of these things that then you can write about?
Yeah, well, we attempt to do that in school. A lot of the writing curriculums, and I've used many different ones throughout my life, attempt to do that. So it sounds really nice in theory, but when you actually put it to practice, because of the constraints that we've sort of talked about, it's really difficult. The fact that, they're asked to focus on so many different subjects. Writing is like 45 minutes a day, or, maybe you have a little bit longer block, but then this is an assignment that needs to be completed by Friday. Friday is not enough time for them to, again, let this ideas marinate and grab from different places and really think about these things when they have so many things going on. So like when you actually try, like I remember when I was going through the course, it was like a full-time job. Like it's the only thing that I was doing. I was only writing. I mean, not only writing, but I was only going through this process, which meant being outside, capturing ideas, letting things marinate, talking, like writing, all this. It like completely immersed in the experience for those, I think it was like 5 weeks back then. And so I think that was a big reason why I was able to, start everything. And then eventually it ended up being a book, etc. Kids don't have that time, right? And everything's so rushed and interrupted and this and that when you put it into practice, again, kids are filled with ideas. But if you talk to a 12-year-old and you're like, okay, tell me about an idea you're excited to write about. And we actually tried this in summer camp. Like they're paralyzed. They're like, I don't know what I like. Like, I don't know what and it's so interesting because we're always like going back to this idea of like, originality and this and that. How can we expect for kids to be original and come up with novel ideas and, find their voice and their edge as a writer and all these things if they're all reading the same thing that they're probably not interested in, but it's like a required reading. And therefore, learning about the same things and talking about the same things. And therefore they're thinking about the same things. So how do you expect for somebody there to come up with something that's completely original? Like it's really difficult. You know what I mean? And so you almost have to, that's why I love like this idea of being outside of the classroom and being with older people and being with younger people and doing other things that are not necessarily like writing and then you start pulling from all those things and it eventually comes together and then they can write about it, right? So it's like a very different experience. So that's why I think like the whole way we do writing in school has to be like revamped and rethought from scratch because it's really difficult to come up with anything and be excited and be creative under those conditions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So tell me about when you're writing your book, when you're writing your pieces, how you think about pulling from other people's ideas and how being freed from the shackles of needing to be original, how now that you've had some liberty, you've been able to write.
I love that question. Okay, so at first, when I joined the course, I was like, okay, I want to talk about education. I have all these ideas, but how is my writing going to be different from, every time I had an idea, I would Google it and somebody, some teacher, some educator around the world had written an article or a book or a sloppy blog post or something. And I was like, oh, like, okay, I understand that not everything has to be original, but like, what's my flair? What's my,
yes.
So I was like, you know what? I need to stop reading books about education. Like I've learned my fair share, but I feel like I've already got like, and I need to start reflecting and tapping into my experience and reading about things that I am interested in without an agenda. So just what am I curious about right now? And I would start grabbing books that I had like about, finance and business and poker and, like learning about mental models and things that I had never, and that I would, probably be intimidated back then. But I was like, I have no assignment that I have to complete at the end of this book. I can stop reading it halfway through if I don't feel like I want to keep reading it. And I gave myself all these different sort of permissions to just, go where my curiosity would take me. And so I started to read books. And because I'm so obsessed with this topic about education and I really want to change the way that we teach and learn, it's always in the back of my mind. So when I was reading, it's a book about, sports, I was always looking for connections that would bring it back to education. And I was able to always sort of make that connection, like between that and kids. And what does this mean for? And I feel like that really brought an angle to my writing, because it not only made it relatable for a lot of people, because, I was weaving in concepts from, gaming and from economics and from psychology and from the sports world, but then blending it in a way that connected to either your experience growing up and going through education and your learning experience, or your kids going through it, or just, the act of learning itself in kids. And it became interesting, right? And then the other thing paired up with that really helped me was that, and it's another lesson that I really had to unlearn. In school, they incentivize you to write with this like big jargons and fancy words and SAT words and, verbose and this and that and say it in 10 pages. And that's what I had in mind. And when I took your course, it really helped me like, wait, no, you want to be simple. You want, strive for simplicity and clarity and, conciseness and just accessibility. And you don't use big fancy terms that I didn't even understand. Like English is not my first language. So you can imagine, I was like trying to imitate all these people using big fancy. I was like, no, stop doing that. Try to be simple. Try to speak like you speak to your students. Like try to do that. And let's see. And people started to really resonate with that, because not only could they find something in the content because I was pulling from different things, but also because I feel like I started valuing simplicity and accessibility. And therefore, I feel like the reader would feel more valued as well. I don't know if that, and then that paired up with, I from the very beginning, I would always try to put like visuals, some visual that made sense to me. I wasn't sure if it made sense to other people, but something about pairing up the words with some sort of visual like that I had in my mind that represented that. Like that helped me engage with the writing. And I started to see that people would also engage with that. So I feel like that started to sort of bring people's eyeballs and saying, okay. And also the fact that, the way that I say things, it's sometimes a little controversial. And some people are like, yes, oh my God, she just said what I've been thinking for so long, but I had not quite like put it into words. And some people are like, wait, what? Like they feel threatened by whatever it is that I'm saying because it's challenging the way they do things. Either way, I'm happy, because that's exactly what I try to do with my writing. I try for it to sort of cause an impression so that it forces you to reflect on the way that you've been doing things, whether that's for the good or for the bad. But just if I'm able to do that, then I feel accomplished. And so I feel like when I started to do that, I got even more excited because I'm like, oh, my writing's very different from other pieces out there education-wise. And so I think that that's sort of the path that I decided to follow for those years that I was sending the newsletter and those articles that then ended up becoming the book.
One of the places where I think you do a really good job in your book of building on an idea is with Naval-specific knowledge. So you're saying, how do we help kids find their specific knowledge? And you build on that idea, you use the idea, it's already constructed, and then you say, okay, I know that there's oil here, so I'm going to do some digging of my own. And then you come across this example from Dr. House. And you're like, he has a knack for understanding human behavior. He has this compulsion to solve puzzles, to explain the world. And then he's super comfortable taking a risk and just being like, yep, we're just going to go for it. And that is a great example of what we're talking about here, where you have an idea, it resonates with you, you're like, hey, I like this. And then you start making some cross references. You probably watched it on Fox. When I was a kid, it was like, oh, the guy with the cane, who is this guy? It sort of reminds me of my uncle. And so then you would bring that together, and then you would add something by taking an idea that wasn't about education and kids at all, and then banging the ideas together, and then it makes it into your book.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a great example. Well, also it was a process that I had to go through myself, like finding what's my, specific knowledge and that intersection of things that make me, excited about doing something, but also very unique and good at it, and that I can make a living out of it. And so I feel like that exercise, and again, it took years to sort of like bring it, and it's still changing and it's still sort of evolving. But I feel like that's a really important exercise to do when you are thinking about writing the way that that way that we do it, right? And so that really helps bring that edge and that nichiness to your writing.